but then you had ECW, who was like in between, because they were the bad boys. They were like, they were fucking shit up and, going against what traditional wrestling was, which is, like the wrestling. And then they were going and using weapons and cutting promos.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So you have
like
that. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where like a lot of like the horror, but then what people don't realize, there was also Japanese wrestling happening too at the same time. Yeah. And then you have the Japanese death matches that are like important to ECW, like the lineage, because, people don't know about Cactus Jack or Mick Foley, how like he won the King of the Deathmatch tournament in 1995. Then he went to ECW for like to finish his contract there, and then immediately jumped ship to go to WWF as Mankind.
Okay, so I do know Mankind.
Yeah, so that's how.
That's such a great fucking name, by the way. What was his character like?
Oh, his Mankind with the mask and then the mandible claw and all that.
Okay, I think I can. And then he has long hair with the mask.
He had long hair. He had like a mask that covered his face. He would rip out his hair, and he talked to his pet rat named George, I believe. Yeah, it was George.
And it was like a legit rat, or was it a stuffed animal?
Yeah, it was like a little rat he had, and it was like a New York rat. It was like pretty big.
It was Pizza Rat.
Yeah, it was nice. And because I remember like finding out about like, because everybody, when you're watching wrestling, you believe these characters, you believe like they're these people outside of it, and like and then reading in the magazines what they did or talked about. But then like as you got older, and then like 96, 97 is like me finishing middle school, going to high school, and then you're changing. Mm-hmm. You're learning a lot about yourself, drugs and friends and sexuality, and you're just like, Then you're starting like finding out about like behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, okay, and, like what?
Interviews being like, there's a lot of interviews or what we call shoots, and like they call in wrestling shoots, and they're out of character and they're just like talking like, oh yeah, Vince McMahon, this person, that person. And they're like, shooting. They're just like shooting the shit. Mm-hmm. Like having a conversation and being like real. But then you're like, is it really real? Are they really being like, are they really talking about their experiences with the wrestler and whatnot? And then you hear more stories about like crazy shit that really happened behind the scenes, like Benoit, that stuff. Or
that's talking about the idea. I'm that story I'm pretty well versed in, or I'm pretty familiar with, because I listened to a podcast called the Last Podcast on the Left, and they did like a multi-part series. Did you listen to that?
Yeah.
Okay, how accurate were they about it? I mean, that shit was crazy.
I mean, it's so, because you still don't know. You still don't know what is like really what happened. I mean, I do believe that there was brain damage. Like I do believe in that, because I know other people are talking about like the like he was on roids, and I'm like, yeah, mostly everybody was on roids.
Yeah, I can't imagine in a fake tournament they're gonna really give a shit about it's funny. I mean, it's interesting also because like, I don't know. Okay, so the whole thing with Chris Benoit, and the story leading to that, and why I bring it up right now is because Benoit and like he did a thing where there was a storyline where he was supposed to like be cheating on somebody with or somebody's like he was having an affair with somebody, and that was the storyline, but it ended up like fulfilling itself. And that's who got killed, right? Like I forget what her name was, but
well, the rest of her character name was Woman.
Yeah. And so it's that is where what I really enjoyed about that series of the podcast, where they're just talking about like how maybe they don't even know what's real and what's not, right? Like if they're so engaged in these characters and they're living them, and they have to like train together and kind of be like, it's almost I think what they said was, be careful what you pretend to be. Yes. Right. Yes. It's which is fucking crazy. Or I think that might be a something quote, a quote from someone famous. Like might be even.
Yeah, I mean, even like actors talk about that too. It's like sometimes it's hard to take away when they're getting into character, like they start believing that they're that character, and then they're like freaking out or having like an identity crisis. And I think a lot of wrestlers have that when they retire or they finish out. It's like, who am I really? Am I this character that I built for like 20 years, or am I like this other person, like, the real name?
That's so sad, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen. And
wow.
It's like funny when you see, like, for example, The Undertaker, who's been like, all of our childhood is like Undertaker. And he finally is like, when you see interviews of him, he's not the character. He's like Mark Calloway. And, it's like, it's weird to see him talking, like just talking and having like a really Southern accent and being very like, this other guy. And you're like,
so Undertaker didn't have a Southern accent?
No, he kind of was like,
I can't remember.
Well, no, he never really talked. He just talked really, and it was very minimal. He didn't really speak. He was just there. And then when you see him now, and then when you see him now in post like retirement, he's just like, talking and having that Southern accent and like just being like normal. And you're like, who the fuck is?
But does he seem okay, or is it? This sounds more like it's a case of where you're struggling with it rather than him.
I think he's okay with. I mean, he's learned how to stay into that character and always be that character, even when he was interviewing as the Undertaker. Being that character, and he even says it, and he goes, "It's so hard to like, you can't break character because when you're being paid or you're on contract, you're like, this is who I am." But then now it's like they can ask him questions. He could be really honest.
Yeah,
because he didn't really.
That's where that fucking Chris Benoit shit gets shady, right? Like where they were acting it out and they couldn't break character, so they had to stay in a room together. Yeah. Like, and I forget the guy who got cucked, but like there was some tragic turn with him. He was also a wrestler, obviously, because it was the storyline. But I forget that, like, I forget what happened, but he was just like, it didn't work out well for him either. It's not like he was happy. It was just like one of those things where it's like, wait, what the fuck? Oh, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
This is supposed to be pretend.
Yeah, you would think it's supposed to be pretend, but then like, when you hear like the stories about certain people, and it's sad. It's really sad when you think about it. I mean, there's like, Mick Foley or like Ric Flair. Like Ric Flair is Ric Flair. Like if you see him outside of like wrestling, he's still the same person.
Okay, so he managed to work that.
I mean, that's just who he is. Like, Ric Flair is like, he believed his own character. I think, and I think that's a lot of wrestlers. They believe their own hype.
Yeah. So you think that he like just is it's more of like he's maybe like a Ziggy Stardust where it's like like he's actually fucking Ziggy Stardust. He's not like pretending.
It's like even though it's David Bowie, but it's still like Ziggy Stardust.
That's crazy.
I mean, I mean, it's like we know about like Jake the Snake, and I don't know if you watched like Inside the Dark Side of the Ring or like the A&E specials, like that stuff. Like they go into like heavy duty backstories, and then there's one about Jake the Snake and how his dad was a pedophile and a wrestler, and then like he has like
his character was a wait hold on
no his father his actual father,
but he was a wrestler that was a pedophile, or a guy who was a heel and his character was being a pedophile.
Like the father in real life was a pedophile. Yeah,
but he wasn't a wrestler.
But he was also a wrestler.
Okay, all right.
And then like he had Jake, but then Jake is like, it's funny because you find out about his story, about his like family, and they're all wrestlers. They all were wrestlers. The brother, they had two other brothers. He had a brother and sister that were wrestlers, and he had another brother who was a little older. But they all have like, they're all fucking like they have demons.
Really?
Because like what they went through and the family.
So they were abused, or was it?
I think Jake talked about being abused. Okay. Also, it's just like the fact that like they knew his, like everybody in the wrestling business knew about like Jake's dad. How he had like all these young girls. It was like if you find the episode, I think it's Dark Side of the Ring or it's a A&E biography. It's like they talk about that, and you're just sitting there like,
Wow.
You know, you're just like, holy shit. But that's like, you know, that stuff they don't talk about. It's like behind the scenes. And then when you listen to Jake is like so fucking broken.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to associate with his real, like his actual name. He actually legally changed his name to Jake Roberts.
Okay. I'm glad he didn't left this. He
Left the snakes out. He didn't want to be, you know, that person he grew up as, you know, and it's because he has so much like darkness and it's like.
So then in that case, do you feel like maybe wrestling helped him?
Yes, but it also almost killed him. Because, you know,
well, I mean, it's also tied to the darkness, right?
Like, yeah. Because he partied and he was doing drugs like everybody in that time period. You know, like if you watch those like funny promos from the 80s, like and 90s, you have Hulk Hogan and all those guys were like either coked out, roided out. They were just like screaming. You were like, you know, there were some drugs. Some partying.
What did you think of our conversation? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our merch store. Special thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, go to patreon.com/whatsmythesis. All the links are in the description below.